the State of the Union address, right? That the president delivers the State of the Union address. And remember, State of the Union address, you want to lay out your agenda for the year, what you want to accomplish. Okay? Question. That's a great question. And you're asking about the vaccines and will Biden be able to keep his promise of getting everybody a vaccine who wants one by the end of the summer? And right now, they're on track to do that. But, you never know what might happen. And so, for example, like I think yesterday, I don't know if it was this class or another one, that let's say something happens to, Moderna and they're not able to produce vaccines anymore. It's not Joe Biden's fault per se, but you made a promise and people expect you to deliver on it. Being president is oftentimes like being the coach of a sports team. All right. The players got to go out and do the job. You're putting them together and trying to put them in the right situations. All right. And when things go well, you get the credit, even if it's not your doing. But when things go wrong, you take the blame for it. You're like, it's not my fault Michael Jordan got hurt and he was injured for half the season. And they're like, well, it doesn't matter. You're the coach. Somebody's got to take the blame. Okay. So let's talk about what else the president can do. All right. That the State of the Union address is a pretty significant thing, but there's more to it than that. Okay. There's also a clause in the Constitution called the Take Care Clause. Ooh, the Take Care Clause. Look, let me show you the text of this first, and I'm slightly out of order, but you'll be all right. The Take Care Clause says, he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. All right. He being the president, yes, women can be president, all right, but in the 1700s, they wrote it that way. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. All right, that's the Take Care Clause. If I left the room and told Losh, I want you to be in charge of the room and you make sure that the laws of the room be faithfully executed, that means she's responsible for making sure everything's followed the way it should be, for carrying out the laws. Okay? If there's not a specific law about something or a specific statement from the legislative branch about how to do something or how to carry out a law, the president gets to choose. So if the law is really vague, that means the president gets a lot of wiggle room. Okay? Here's an example. You guys know what Social Security is, right? Retirement pension for old people. Right? It does not say in Social Security law how payments are delivered. So if it doesn't say how they're to be delivered, who gets to decide that? Well, it says that the president has to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And if it says old people are to get payments every month, what's the president got to do? Make sure old people get paid. All right? What's one way to do that? How do you make sure old people get money every month? It's not a trick question. Yes, but how do you get them that money? You send it in the mail, right? In what form? Do we send them cash? Check. We send a check, right? Okay. At least in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, you did that, right? But what's another option we have now? Like PayPal, you could do that. What do most people get their paycheck through now? Direct deposit. All right. So do you want, like, does the president have the authority to do that? Yes, the president would, because it doesn't say in the law. Now, that's good. Sometimes Congress will write a law and leave some vagueness on purpose so the president has some flexibility. Okay? That allows the president to figure out the best way to do this. Because, for example, like in 1935, mailing a check was a great idea. But in our world today, what? Do old people really want to have to go to the mail or wait? A lot of them don't. And they don't have to go to the bank and deposit a check. So direct deposit works, or electronically transmitting the money. You've seen that with, like, well, you all haven't seen that, sorry, but the COVID stimulus money, you had the option of going online, and instead of getting a check, you could have it digitally transferred into your account. And it's nice, man. You monitor your account online, and you see that check drop on there, and you're like, oh yeah, U.S. Treasury putting money in my account, right? Making it rain in there, my friend. You know what I'm saying? All right. Don't worry, that money will probably go to like my mortgage payment. But you get the idea, okay? So if the law doesn't say, then the president says, look, My job, the law says that senior citizens who qualify have to get Social Security payments. So it's my job to figure out how to get them to them. Okay? The same way that if I'm like, I leave the room and I'm like, Maggie, your job is to make sure the room gets cleaned. Okay? And make sure that the law is carried out. The law is the room must be cleaned. All right? I don't care how you do it. I'm leaving it to you because you might come up with some good ways to do something that I would not. All right? Now, giving the president that flexibility is good in some ways, right? But it can be really bad too, because what might presidents do if the law is really vague? Take advantage of it and perhaps do something in a not so beneficial way. Or, for example, like let's say the president wanted to be a jerk and say, we're not going to mail checks at all. Okay? It's going to be online. You have to do it this way. All right? Do you think people would be a little annoyed at that? Yeah, there's some people like me who like going to the bank, who like building relationships with people, and who also want to see their check before it gets deposited. Now you're like, Mr. Scalise, that's really strange. I know, but there are still people like me, and most of them are over 60. All right. Notice this too. Do old people like to change the way they do things? No. Once they get accustomed to something, they don't like to change. Getting my dad to use a Windows email program other than Windows Mail 2011 was a really difficult task. All right. But once I showed him that the email program was basically the same, it just looked different, everything was okay. But believe me, it was a long, drawn out process. All right. So ultimately, presidents can make dumb decisions and people get annoyed. All right. But you got to give the president some flexibility. Now, that take care clause gives the president what we call inherent powers. All right. It's kind of like, how Congress has the necessary and proper clause, which can give them the ability to make laws about stuff that's not necessarily in the Constitution. This is the president's version of that. This gives him room to do things that aren't listed in the Constitution. Okay? As long as the law doesn't tell him that he can't do it, presidents will presume they can. Oh, gosh. Being president is amazing. I want to be president. What do you think? Vote for Scalise in 2024. My campaign slogan will be vote for Scalise. It'll be fun. What could go wrong? Things can't get any worse. We've hit rock bottom. I'm not Trump. I'm not ancient. That's how I should do it. If 2024 is a Trump Biden rematch, I might cry. My God, geriatric patients unite. I could be. There's some people who definitely think there should be an age limit too. It is ageist, but you know what? Sometimes we should be ageists. All right. Now, the take care clause is important in here. State of the Union also in there. The president also has the authority to call Congress into session. Congress normally has 2 3-month sessions during the year, but that means there's 6 months out of the year they're not working, they're not in session. And if the president thinks there's something they should be doing, he can insist that they return to Washington and do their jobs, Maggie. It's great. Wouldn't you? I would probably do it just for fun, just to mess with Congress and show them who's boss. All right? The president can call Congress into session. The president also has the authority to veto legislation. Ooh. Vetoing legislation. Vetoing legislation means to block it or to forbid it. Right? Vetoing legislation means to block it or to forbid it. All right, question? Veto. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss something on the outline there? I might have rearranged something. Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. I forgot to put that on my outline on here. On your outline, it does say that. Ultimately, when the president calls Congress into session, or even when they're in their regular session, the president recommends certain legislation they should follow. Okay? That's part of, and I should have clarified, I'm sorry about that. That's part of his agenda, part of what he wants to get done. So, for example, like what's Joe Biden, what's he telling Congress they should be passing? COVID relief bill. Okay? And also yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, but the House of Representatives passed the Equality Act, which is what we talked about earlier, that would amend the Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation as something as a protected class. Like you wouldn't be able to fire somebody or throw them out of housing or discriminate against them because of their sexuality. Question. Really? All right. Now, the great question is this, like your company, you're talking about Chick-fil-A. If they specifically, look, if they, right now, the way, like if this law passed the Equality Act, what it would do is if you'd have to prove that some company either refused to hire you or they fired you based on your sexuality. But it would be hard, like it's hard to prove sometimes because let's say a company doesn't hire somebody that happens to be gay. Well, they might have done it because, well, this person, they don't have references or they didn't interview very well or there was a better qualified candidate. So the one problem with that would be that you might not be able to prove it. All right. Now, here's another thing that Joe Biden had specifically said. He said, look, the House passed this. Now the Senate needs to pass it. And he basically was all but saying, once the Senate passes it, I'll sign it and it'll become law. Okay. So he's recommending to Congress to do that. And he's sending signals to them. This is the legislation I think is important. Okay. Which means you should think it's important too. All right. Now, the veto power, okay? Obviously, if a president's, first of all, if he's recommending that Congress pass legislation, what is he going to do? Is he going to veto it or sign it? He's going to sign it, okay? Now, if Congress chooses to ignore him and do something against his wishes, he has the ability to say no, to veto that legislation, okay? And that's obviously a big deal. Now, for a short time, there was one unique thing about the veto power that doesn't exist anymore. Back in the 90s, good old Bill Clinton. Oh, Bill Clinton, what a wild guy. All right. Now, Bill Clinton one of his goals was to cut spending. But he said, I want to do this in kind of a responsible type of way. He says, we need to not have to borrow money. All right. And here's his plan. Here's what he did. He convinced Congress, and Congress went along with this. Congress passed a law that gave the president a power called the line item veto, where what it meant was literally the president could go through a bill line by line while approving certain parts but vetoing other parts. He would be like, I like section 1, but section 2 is a no-go for me. Sections 3 and 4 work well. You could literally approve or disapprove of individual parts of a bill. The line item veto. Like, here's an item in a line. Right? So imagine that you'd go through a bill and you could basically cross out the sentences you don't like and veto those and approve the rest. Now, what Bill Clinton started doing with this power was he would cut out a bunch of pork projects that got passed through in a bill. All right? So, yeah, you're like, oh, all right? And that let him cut back on wasteful spending in government. And a lot of people really liked it. And they said, you know what? This is a good thing for the president to have. Okay? But here's the problem with that. When you start cutting pork projects, who gets upset about that? The people who arranged it and the people who were going to benefit from it. All right? And so here's what happened. In New York City, several hospitals were slated to get some money from the government, and they didn't get it because Clinton vetoed that part of the bill. All right? And so they filed a lawsuit against Bill Clinton. Okay? They claimed the line item veto violated the Constitution. All right? And they said, here's why it violates the Constitution. It violates the principle of separation of powers. Because if you're letting Bill Clinton pick and choose which line to approve and which line not to approve, what kind of power are you letting him have? Who's the only group that can actually write and edit laws? The legislative branch. And they said, look, Bill Clinton's the chief executive, okay? You can't let the executive exercise lawmaking power. That violates the principle of separation of powers. And so they told Bill Clinton, the Supreme Court said, look, from here on out, you either have to give the bill and you have to approve the entire thing or you reject the entire thing. You can't pick and choose what you want. This is not a buffet. Man. Yes. Now that's a really good thing. Presidents, when they veto or sign a bill, often what they'll do on there is put like a what's called a veto message or a signing statement saying, "Here's what I found wrong with the bill, and if you send me this bill back with the following changes made, then I would pass it." And that's permitted. But they said, "Look, the president can't just pick and choose. Congress has to be the one that passes that law." All right. And so presidents will do that when they sign a bill or veto it. They'll put their comments on it. Basically, here's why I signed it, or here's why I didn't sign it. All right. And that's a nice signal to Congress. Hey, if you want my approval, here's exactly what I think of it, or here's what you should do to fix it. Okay. It's almost like a teacher gives you back a rough draft and says, here's what's wrong with it. Fix it. Okay. Now, a last thing we want to mention here that's in Article 2 about powers of the president, impeachable offenses. The president can be impeached for three things. Two of them are very specific. Treason is one. Treason. Give me a T. R. Oh, sorry, wrong tier. Okay. Treason. Second thing, bribery. Can't take bribes. I don't know, Jesse. I would probably want to take a bribe if it was like a lot of money. I could be bought. Treason, bribery. Now, those are pretty straightforward. But the other one, the third thing, is where it gets a little tricky. The third statement is other high crimes and misdemeanors. Great question. All right. And people have been very frustrated about the impeachment process in the last year because we've seen Donald Trump get impeached by the House twice, but did the Senate convict him either time? No. All right. And the most recent impeachment had to do with Bill, or excuse me, I was about to say Bill Clinton. Donald Trump. The charges against him were that he basically conspired to and provoked this crowd to take their grievances to the Capitol and not just take their grievances there, but to become violent with them. And the House impeached him, and you had 10 Republicans voting with Democrats to impeach, but they didn't get enough votes in the Senate to convict and remove. All right. And so people were kind of frustrated because they're like, this sends a signal that you can get away with a lot and still not get convicted or thrown out of office. All right. So those are the president's powers that are in the Constitution. Okay. And we'll get to his other powers later on. That's a good place for us to stop at the moment.